Robinson, and this is the Gnostic Syncretist Podcast. Thank you for joining me tonight. We have some very interesting stuff to go over, and we're going to continue to dive deeply into the occult cosmology, as told by the Rosicrucians, the Theosophists, and the Anthroposophists, and the Esoteric Mystery Tradition, because it is fundamental to understanding the entirety of their teachings. To do that, you must understand the cosmology and the nature of the incarnations of the earth and humanity in conjunction with the earth. It's connected. And so the reincarnation cycle and our monads' ensoulment and the acquiring of the seven subtle bodies is tied to the earth incarnations and its densification down into the full physical earth that we live in today, and our full physicalization that we reside in today in this vehicle. They are concurrent. They evolve concurrently. They involve down into matter, and then we evolve out of matter together. So if this is not understood, you are easily able to be subjected to misdirection and a deviation from this cosmology with ancient aliens and New Age concepts about the Galactic Council and our how we were previously the Pleiadians or the Syrians in our last life, and this is not correct. Not saying that those don't exist. I'm saying specifically that the expanded blueprint of our cosmic evolution, along with the Earth, is left out of those schemes, and they're fundamental to understanding who we are today. So we're going to continue to go over that for this reason. This is an article I've written on my website, and I'm going to use some of this to portray how this occurs. We'll start at the beginning. In the occult and esoteric traditions, there is an aphorism, which states a rock becomes a plant an animal a man a spirit, and a spirit a god. And this sums up the entire monadic ensoulment scheme, evolutionary scheme, where all the endless sparks that are emanated and reflected or mirrored out of the one cause, the logos, and the absolute primordial essence, manifest into our world according to this one aphorism's scheme. And this sums up the scheme. And we'll explain this scheme as we go along. It is a cyclical and perpetual involutionary and evolutionary system of activity which proceeds over aeons of time, and it only ends at the end of the entirety of the cycle, and the cycle is called Amanvatara in the East, and it begins with the first manifestation in existence and ends with what's called a cosmic pralaya, which is when all things in existence are disintegrated and reabsorbed back into the one to be eventually remanifested on a higher level in the next great cycle, or Manvatara. And this is the true nature of the whole reincarnation cycle. Of course, we're not going to go over its entirety, but that is the full cycle. So this great reincarnation cycle of monad ensoulment occurs along a septenary, or so to speak, seven-based system in a sequential fashion, upon 7 stages or rounds of evolution, which run along the globe or earth incarnation scheme at the same time, and they're concurrent with our monadic one. The entirety of this cosmic process has been highly detailed and delineated in The Secret Doctrine by Blavatsky. It's also explained in the Rosicrucian Cosmic Conception by Max Heindel, and also in Rudolf Steiner's works. The Rudolf Steiner goes a little more into other facets of this process in the Atlantean and the Lemurian period than some of these other books do. However, reading all three is essential. The Secret Doctrine, both books, Cosmogenesis and Anthropogenesis, Max Heidel's Rosicrucian Cosmic Conception, and Rudolf Steiner's Cosmic Memory. All three books add different facets and different levels of understanding to the entirety of this scheme, which is our scheme. And we need to understand our cosmology and the nature of how we got to be here where we are today in 2025, because there are plenty of forces out there that do not desire you to ever understand these concepts and would much rather you fall in line with ancient aliens or some sort of new age concept of a galactic council and, you know, your incarnation as a Pleiadian or a Sirian or some other, you know, planetary based scheme or race, and that does not involve this normal esoteric tradition scheme, which is the core to all of the esoteric tradition for the most part, is understanding the cosmology first and foremost, and then the details on how to develop from here forward and evolve go after that, really. Because if you don't understand where you come from, there's no point in understanding how to go into the future, because the future is tied to the past and the past to the future. So both need to be understood. But first and foremost, the cosmology must be understood because, it's our cosmic past. And there's no point in really developing spiritually if you're not going to understand where you came from. So, in Cosmogenesis and the Secret Doctrine, this process of monadic evolution is one which links the microcosmic with the macrocosmic aspects of the cosmos in relation to the hierarchy of being. And it's according to and corresponds to all the previous cycles that go before it. So we're not the first, and we will never be the last of this monad wave of evolution. There's many life waves, as they call them in these traditions, and we are part of a life wave. There were previous life waves, and the life waves that have already evolved further than we have are beings of an angelic nature. They are the angels and the archangels, and beings even higher than that. But those beings helped us evolve and also went through this human stage that we're in now. So, if one is to attempt an extrapolation of the process from the first unfoldment and on into the future, they must realize that there is no ending or beginning to this process, because the beginning starts with the beginning of cosmic differentiation at the beginning of the universe and ends, technically, when it is all reabsorbed back into this same one, the all, and the all then falls asleep and awaits until the next great cycle begins, and then awakens and redifferentiates the entirety of the cosmos and us with it. So it's all one giant cycle. Can seem like a lot to try to go through all this on such a massive cosmic scale, but it's necessary to understand how big the scale is, because understanding the nature of the scale, you realize what the nature of you is in the middle of this process, because we're fundamental to the process. We are a fundamental stage, the human stage, in this process of cosmic unfoldment. We are absolutely a pivotal part of it. So you must understand the nature of our place in the scheme to understand your place in the whole cosmos itself, and that gives you perspective that you cannot get anywhere else. So the ways in which these cycles operate is through cosmic days and nights, where Brahma is essentially periodically in a state of activity or inactivity. And the days of Brahma, a day of Brahma is a period of awakened activity of this primal essence. And then it proceeds into a manifestation and emanation systematically, generating the cosmic superstructures. And then once it reaches its apex, halfway through the cycle, it starts to dissolve and go into what's called the night of Brahma, which is a period of complete rest where all of manifested existence, as I said, is disintegrated and reabsorbed back into the original primal essence. And then it rests in a period of sleep cycle, so to speak. And this process is consecutive, successive, and periodical, and one day follows a night and then lapses back into another day, and so on for eternity. And also, it should be noted that the days and nights are identical in duration or length, which is some extraordinarily massive number, like 311 trillion years accordingly. Now, I can't verify that, but that's what they say. It's that big. So, the beginning of a cycle, or Day of Brahma, is manifestation and differentiation from a single source down into all the different types of substances that exist and down to us. This proceeds from two concepts: cosmic ideation, which is the cosmic consciousness, so to speak, a form of consciousness, and cosmic substance, matter itself. Substance in ideation, matter in mind, consciousness and substance are the two types and aspects of this one essence. And everything in existence is either one or the other. This is ensouled into that. Consciousness goes into a vehicle of substance. That is how it begins to experience itself. And you are a end product of this long process of densification of a mind inside a vehicle of substance. And so as the cosmology proceeds, you gain greater and greater levels of consciousness and greater diversity of ability within your vehicle. And you gain additional vehicles that allow for greater expression. And this is on a 7-based scale, a septenary scale. So the monads come to the equation through the emanations of what are called Dayan Chohans, which are basically the nature of the gods, the first gods in existence, which evolve and manifest every other aspect of the cosmos. Because the one does not do that, it relegates its abilities and its power of manifestation to this aggregate of gods, which are really sparks themselves of a spirit mirrored by the first logos into themselves. They are the different aspects of the logos. The monads are the highest aspect of man's nature of the 7 principles. And it's the first one that he becomes endowed with in evolution. We have our monad first, and it is an extremely low level of consciousness when we begin. And it becomes ensouled in our very first vehicle, the physical body, in an extremely etheric state. And the first man came into existence essentially only had that one aspect out of the 7, and the remaining 7 aspects we acquired over time through the subsequent evolutionary process. However, before the stage in which man manifests around his monad, there are all the preceding stages the monadic essence must undergo before reaching that one. Now, you may start to ask yourself, this is pretty complicated. It is. But I'm going to try to break it down to a more understandable level, if I can. That's the goal tonight. And this process of monadic re-ensoulment, continual re-ensoulment, transpires over many, many eras of the cosmos and undergoes first involution and then evolution in rounds upon different Earths. And each Earth has 7 rounds in each part of the cycle. So it incarnates and we incarnate repeatedly on that Earth as it changes it in its own nature. The Earth changes and densifies, our environment changes. It did not start physical either, no matter what science says. It was first, basically a watery, etheric-like planet. It's like a pre-physical Earth, but we existed on it all the same, and because we weren't physical either, we were also in that same state of density. And as it changed, we changed with it, and as it got deeper and deeper into matter, we acquired different vehicles of expression and perception to engage with the new environment that was created and was more dense. So it goes hand in hand. These stages or cycles are also of a 7-fold nature, and they are a sequence whereby the manifestation in the initial cycle is of the first initiation, the first cycle is an exceedingly spiritual constitution or density, where it's basically so etheric you can barely comprehend it. And I can't comprehend it either, but that's how they explain it. It's very abstract. which progressively involutes or involves itself in matter. So there's a scheme where it falls into matter and then rises back out of matter. So it's like a U. You start at the top where you're pure spirit. So is the earth. It's extremely etheric, vibrational density. And then as it falls into matter, it involutes into matter and then reaches the middle point, which is where we are now, and then rises back out of matter as it evolves out of matter. That's the nature of the process. So, during this process, the earth, our environment, and ourselves, the monad ensouled in a vehicle, becomes denser, grosser, and more material with each manifestation, until we arrive at our current world paradigm in the extremely physical time period that we're in now, which in this cosmology is called the fourth round on the fourth earth. And a round, there's been 3 preceding rounds, and each round has 7 earth incarnations where we evolve along with the earth. And those first 3 rounds of, basically 7 earths each time, so that's 21, so to speak, earths in the previous 3 rounds, all became more and more dense and more grossly material, not gross in like a nasty sense, but just denser. And then in this round, the fourth round, there were also 3 more earths that have fallen deeper and deeper into matter until we reach the bottom of the scale. At the very bottom of the entirety of the scheme is where we are now, in the most material earth and at the apex of material reality. This is the lowest in matter you go. And now we are on the process of rising out of it. So is the earth. That's why they talk about 2 earths, because this earth is going to become a new earth, and we rise with it as it becomes etherized, and we become etherized with it if we follow this scheme properly and evolve properly with the earth's evolution. There is another, the other earth is the one where we fail. So the monads undergo progressive ensoulments with the earth's ensoulment. And these various stages of evolution begin with an incarnation into what's called the mineral state of existence, or the mineral. It's not really the mineral world. I say world here, but it's really a mineralized state of existence, which really means a state of consciousness. Don't think of like regular minerals in our periodic table. The mineral stage, which is at the beginning of this video, I mentioned a rock becomes a plant becomes an animal, and so on. That is what it's referring to. Those are the different stages of our evolution in a very generalized sentence. So the mineral state of consciousness is almost like a trance state of consciousness. It's what we were in when this entire scheme begins. The mineral state of consciousness, where we had a physical body and a monad, and our consciousness was so dim as to be considered trance-like, or in a mineral state, because that's the type of consciousness minerals have in the world we live today. They do have a level of consciousness. It's so dim as to be basically trance-like, or like they're completely asleep. And that's the first stage. The second stage is the plant state of existence, which is the next stage of human evolution, where we acquire the physical body with an ether body. The ether body is also present in plants, according to this cosmology. So plants have an ether body, and so do we, which is also sometimes called the vital body. And that level of consciousness is like a dreamless sleep, as they call it. That's the state of consciousness in that state of evolution. So as we evolve, we go through the mineral state and then the plant state. And in the plant state, we acquire the ether body, because plants have that today, which is a level of consciousness which is much lower than the one we're in today. After that stage, and in the next stage, we are in the animal stage, which is becomes an animal-like state of consciousness, where we acquire the astral body. And that state of consciousness has been delineated as akin to a dreamful sleep. a type of consciousness that you would experience when you are in a dream, and you have pictures in your mind. They're chaotic. They're not always in sequence, and they are all over the place. But we have it, and the Earth in these stages was an environment in which we could utilize that level of consciousness for our existence. And each one of these stages, the mineral, the plant, and the animal epoch, coincides with an Earth state, an environmental state, where the Earth allowed us to utilize each level of consciousness and changed each time, to where the Earth becomes more dense, there's more to our environment, and thus we needed these additional levels of consciousness to interact with our environment as we evolve and the Earth evolves. And then also in this stage, which is basically the third round, or really let's consider it the third Earth. We'll just stay in our one chain of the fourth round. There's 3 Earths before this one, and those are the 3 stages: the mineral, the plant, and the animal stage. And now we're in the human stage. But also in the previous stage, we started to acquire the germ of our ego, or self-consciousness. Now, I wasn't awake yet, but it was there. It had become, so to speak, inserted into our being and had started to germinate, as if you want to put it that way, and does not fully germinate and become awake until the stage we're in now, when we become human, so to speak. It's like we were always human, but we weren't in a human-like state of consciousness until the 4th stage. We did not acquire self-consciousness until the human stage. So to speak, we were always human. I know it can be confusing. So, what do we have? Let's go back over it. We go through the mineral state of consciousness, which is trance-like. We go through the plant state of consciousness, which is asleep, sleeping but with a dreamless sleep. Then we go into the animal state of consciousness, which is a dream-filled sleep state of consciousness. And we get the germ of our ego, the I, as they call it. And then we reach the beginning of the human stage, which goes way back to the Lemurian epoch of our time period, which was millions of years ago. And this is when the I first starts to germinate and become awakened, is during the Lemurian stage. But it does not really fully become awakened until near the end of the Lemurian period and in the beginning of the Atlantean period, when the first humans, which were, in the sense that we think of ourselves today as self-conscious beings with a mind, that is the beginning of the Atlantean period. That's when we get the mind body, the mental body. So when we first get our mental body is during the Atlantean period. And the mental body is still in a very, very rudimentary form at the beginning of the Atlantean race. So these are called root races. And the root races are 7 in nature, and each race, each one of these 1 through 7 root races, has 7 subraces. Though I know it's complicated, but we're not going to go into all the subraces because it's unnecessary. So the first root race was basically when we were in a completely mineralized state of consciousness with only a physical body and a divine spark. Essentially, that's all we had. And then the second stage is called the Polarian epoch, where we start to get an ether body and a different state of consciousness, which is still very asleep, and we're not physical yet. In the third stage, we get our astral body. We're in a dream-filled state of consciousness, and we're bordering on like an astral etheric, we're coming type of density, and we're getting close to physicalization. And in the fourth, and so about near the end of that stage, we start to reach the human stage. We're actually considered an androgynous being. But when we fully reach the 4th stage, we have physicalized, we become materialized. We're in the earth we kind of think of today. It wasn't as dense as now, but it was physical as far as we would say. And we were physical. And we split into the sexes at that time. That is what they say. The androgynous being materializes and then splits into the sexes, male and female. And this was necessary as a step in our evolution. And that's the end of what's called involution. Evolution begins after that, and where we evolve out of matter. But before that, it's involution, spirit falling into matter. That is the real fall of man in the story of the Bible. Truly interpreted, is the falling of the spirit, the monad, the spark, the divine spark, a reflection of the primal essence of the universe, falls into material reality. That is the fall, where we, of course, lose our perception of the spiritual planes to gain other abilities. And then we reascend with those newfound abilities as a human, with a self-conscious I or ego and a mental body and the others, and we re-spiritualize and become aware of the physical, not only the physical planes, but the superphysical planes again, and re-spiritualize as we ascend out and evolve. So we had to lose that first. That's the spiritual fall of man. That spirit falls into matter. It loses itself in matter, and it's a necessity to do so. That is real evolution. That's our actual cosmic history in evolution. It was not a fall, a disgraceful fall. It was simply the monad falling into matter, gaining multiple subtle bodies and ways of expression, and it had to lose its perception of the spiritual world to gain a perception of the physical. But we are now regaining, and in the process of regaining, our connection to those spiritual worlds on the ascending arc of this whole scheme. So it was necessary to lose that natural perception of the spiritual world, which the Lemurians had and the Atlanteans had to a degree. But it was starting to be lost during the Atlantean period, to be honest. But the Lemurians instinctively and intuitively were able to interact with the spiritual planes. But they also had a very low level, or near non-existent level, of self-conscious awareness and mind. And as they started to gain those two things, they lost the connection with the spiritual realm because it was necessary. Otherwise, things would become too confusing. You can't do everything at once. So, the monad undergoes... So we're going to go back just a little bit. The incarnating vehicle of the human accumulates the potential experiences of monad growth in every and all forms offered by manifested existence. This is the reason why the monad goes through all these stages, because there's stages beyond the human, obviously, the angelic stage and the archangelic stage, and we will go into those stages in the future as we evolve. But the human stage is a stage, and it is a fundamental stage. It is the pass or fail stage, to be honest. So all the different archangels and angels and gods have all gone through our stage and succeeded and have moved on into the other stages where they're not physical anymore and they're more of an ethereal nature. But they went through our stage, and thus we will get to their stage. And if we, basically succeed in evolution. But the point of the whole scheme is for the monad to undergo every single level of and type of existence that is capable of in manifested existence. The monad must experience everything. That is why it goes through all these stages, because the monad is trying to experience everything. God's trying to experience the reality that it's created. And it must do so through all these different stages, vehicles, and incarnations before it goes back up and becomes God again. It's kind of just the whole scheme itself, honestly. And God experiencing a reality. And so that's why we go through a mineral state, a plant state, an animal state, a human state, an angelic state. It's because God wants to experience, once not the right word, it's just the nature of the scheme. It is a mirrored reflection, a spark of the divine experiencing all these states. And that's us. We are the monad and the vehicles that can experience these states. So it's fundamental to understand all this, because that is who we really are. We are all these different subtle bodies with these different experiences and these different layers and levels of consciousness that we can use to perceive our reality. And so there's our everyday state of consciousness, and then there's, altered states. When you go into meditation and become proficient enough to go into an altered state of consciousness, you can then re-perceive these realms that were much easier for us to perceive back in the evolutionary scheme. And that is what spiritual development is all about, is being able to re-perceive these spiritual states of our reality. And it's not something to be done lightly, I will add, because doing it lightly is dangerous. This is why you need to understand the cosmology and how long and hard and arduous was the journey of your monad to reach these states. That to just, kind of nonchalantly just jump into the astral plane is absolutely dangerous and not recommended by adepts in the mystery tradition. You slowly gain knowledge and experience and develop your different bodies. You work on the bodies, and then eventually you can go into what's called the astral plane. Once you're trained, or once you've developed for a while, probably years. And then you can adequately navigate these planes with the experience necessary to not be deceived by different entities, to not be, kind of get lost in the phantasmagoria of the whole experience, because the astral plane is also called the plane of illusions. It has, basically aspects of existence represented there symbolically. So what's on the astral plane is still an illusion. That is still a low part of the cosmic plane scale. It is not a high level of existence. It's higher than we are. But it is not the spiritual planes. And that needs to be always remembered, that going to the astral plane is not the reason that we spiritually develop. It is a byproduct. It is a part of the plan or the scheme, and we do end up interacting with it, but it always has to be remembered that it is called the plane of illusion in Maya, because there are so many things that are going on in that plane that still only represent symbolically higher spiritual aspects of existence. They have a reflection there, but they are not the actual essence itself. The essence is still on a much higher plane. But there are reflections of those same principles on the astral plane, but they can deceive you into being the essence themselves. You will think you have found those essences when really they're just a reflection of the essence. That must be borne in mind if you go to the astral plane, is that that's not the real spiritual planes, even though it may seem that way. It is actually just a reflection of the higher planes themselves, just like we are a reflection of higher spiritual principles in our body. So all this is essential to really understand spiritual development in our cosmic history and how to evolve into the future. So another thing I want to absolutely highlight tonight is something that is often missed, and by a lot of people that go into studying reincarnation. There is no regression. And the concept of reincarnating in the next incarnation into a plant or an animal or a bug does not occur in the occult cosmology. There's no going back. There's no regression. Now, you get karmic repercussions for the things you do in life. That just means you incarnate in another human, but in a different state that, is, a consequence of your karmic actions in this life or the previous life. That is all that means. There is no, you're bad, you've had a bad life, you've done bad things, you have engaged in immoral behavior, and you're put into a bug body or a plant body. Or you don't become a dog or a cat or a butterfly or a bird. Those are already stages that have already been completed by every human that's alive today and every monad that's in every human. Those states are completed. There's no regression in the scheme. You can only imagine how chaotic such a scheme would get if that regression occurred. It would be insanity. It would be madness. It would totally dissolve the scheme itself. So, absolutely, there is no regression. And the concept of reincarnating in a plant or an animal, as some think and postulate, is essentially non viable and impossible, since incarnation follows an evolutionary scheme designed for progressive accumulation of experiences from our current stage of the manifested cycle and from the prior stages. So it would be a lack of, you basically would mess up the entirety of the scheme if that occurred. So that is not the case. The human monad will always and invariably reincarnate back into another vehicle of the same type of this stage, which is human. Meaning a human vehicle, never regressing back into a previous stage of animal or plant incarnation, since those experiences were already absorbed and finished, and the accumulated experiences are already part of the monad experience. And thus, it's absolutely unnecessary to go backwards. And it's not viable. It does not progress anything. So, in Blavatsky's Cosmogenesis, the totality of this process is rendered in extraordinary detail. And so, I absolutely recommend reading that. In the next video, we're going to go over the second part of the incarnation cycle and go into a little bit more of what occurs like immediately after death, so the post-death experience of reincarnation and how it unfolds. So, I hope you've been able to stick with me this whole time. My name is Sam Robinson. Thank you for watching. This is the Gnostic Secretist podcast, and today we've gone over the cosmic evolutionary process of monadic ensoulment, and we're going to continue that into the next video. This will be a two-part, and the whole cosmology is a massive scheme itself, so this is a continuation of our previous video, and the next video will be basically following up on this one. So once again, thank you for watching. I know this is some kind of complicated, but bear with me as we go through this scheme. And in the future, we'll get into things beyond this scheme, obviously, like the Lemurian and the Atlantean root races and what those experiences were like for humanity in those stages of evolution. But for now, we're just trying to get a basic understanding of the system of monadic ensoulment itself. And thank you for watching. My name is Sam Robinson, and this is the Gnostic Secretist podcast, and we will be seeing you next time.